One unstable exit, one equipment failure, one split-second miscalculation. That's all it takes to transform 5 experienced base jumpers into tragic statistics from the sport's deadliest period. Their stories prove that expertise means nothing when gravity decides to claim its price. It was March 15, 2016, when 34-year-old Orin Bartlett prepared for what would become his final wingsuit flight at Cherag, Norway. The methodical stunt rigger from Los Angeles had built his reputation on precision and risk assessment, qualities that had kept him alive through over 400 base jumps across 6 continents. Bartlett stood 6 feet 2 inches tall with the lean build of someone who understood that every pound mattered when hurtling through the air at terminal velocity. His colleagues knew him as the guy who triple-checked everything, the one who would abort a jump if conditions weren't perfect. That morning, however, documentary deadlines and the allure of capturing footage near the dramatic Carrickfossen waterfall created pressure that would prove fatal. The 42-year-old director had hired Bartlett specifically for his expertise in proximity flying. The plan was ambitious: capture dramatic footage of the wingsuit pilot threading between the massive waterfall's spray columns, something that required threading the needle between spectacular visuals and catastrophic rotor turbulence. At 1,982 feet above Lysefjord, Kjerag's cliff face generated complex, unstable airflow that changed minute by minute. During morning reconnaissance, test streamers dropped from the exit point behaved erratically, snapping upward before being driven back toward the cliff in opposing directions. A classic indicator of rotor turbulence created as prevailing airflow curled behind the waterfall and rebounded toward the rock face. Bartlett's handheld anemometer registered gusts reaching 22 miles per hour, but the rapidly shifting wind vectors and sudden reversals painted a more troubling picture than the raw numbers alone. The 36-year-old veteran cameraman serving as safety observer had suggested postponing, but the documentary schedule was tight. Bartlett revised his flight plan, opting for an earlier, more conservative track away from the wall. His single parachute base rig was equipped with a pilot chute sized for quick on-heading openings, essential when flying near terrain. That morning, Bartlett executed a clean forward dive from the rocky ledge. His wingsuit inflated smoothly as he angled 45 degrees off the fall line, building crucial horizontal distance from the turbulent air mass surrounding the waterfall. For 6 seconds, everything proceeded according to plan. Then, the invisible hand of rotor struck. At 8 seconds into his flight, Bartlett intersected a violent shear boundary. His left wing suddenly lost pressure, inducing a sharp roll that threatened to send him tumbling toward the cliff face. Fighting to maintain control, he applied correction inputs while his descent rate increased dramatically. Recognizing the deteriorating situation, Bartlett pitched his pilot chute at 10 seconds, prioritizing a clean opening over optimal deployment altitude. The canopy inflated rapidly, but rotated approximately 180 degrees off-heading, now pointing directly toward the wall he had worked so hard to avoid. Later analysis showed how unforgiving the physics had become. With only 200 feet separating him from the cliff face, Bartlett applied brake input to turn away, but the rotor that had caused his predicament now pushed his canopy inexorably toward the rock. The mist zone enveloped him, reducing visibility to mere feet as his canopy brushed the waterfall's edge. At 16 seconds into what should have been a routine wingsuit flight, Bartlett struck a protruding ledge at a high double-digit impact speed. His lower extremities absorbed the initial impact, resulting in bilateral fractures to both legs and a devastating pelvic ring disruption. The secondary impact drove his head and chest against the unforgiving granite, causing a basilar skull fracture and severe lung contusions. His canopy snagged on the rocky outcropping, and Bartlett slid 150 feet down to a narrow ledge where he came to rest. The ground spotter lost visual contact immediately, deploying a drone to locate the downed jumper while coordinating with Norwegian rescue services. 3 hours later, when rescue teams finally reached the remote ledge using technical climbing equipment, they found Bartlett had succumbed to his massive injuries. The medic pronounced death at the scene, attributing it to blunt force trauma with non-survivable head and thoracic injuries. The recovered footage would later reveal the deadly sequence in stark detail, showing how rotor-induced off-heading openings near big walls represent one of base jumping's most lethal scenarios. The production company quietly canceled their proximity filming plans, but Bartlett's death would soon be overshadowed by an even more shocking case involving a complete beginner who thought YouTube videos were sufficient training for one of the world's most dangerous sports. It was August 7, 2017, when 28-year-old Imani Reed stood on the rail of Perrine Bridge in Twin Falls, Idaho, preparing for what should have been a routine supervised base jump. The software engineer from San Francisco had approached extreme sports with the same analytical mindset that made her successful in coding, but her methodical nature couldn't compensate for the unforgiving physics of low-altitude parachuting. Reed stood 5 feet 6 inches tall with the lean build of a dedicated runner. Her colleagues at the tech startup knew her as someone who researched everything exhaustively before making decisions. She'd completed 35 skydives and recently finished a first jump course in base jumping, earning her place among the small community of people willing to leap from fixed objects with a single parachute. The 41-year-old local instructor had chosen Perrine Bridge specifically for Reed's progression training. At 486 feet above the Snake River, it offered legal year-round jumping with multiple landing options, making it ideal for coaching beginners through the critical transition from aircraft to fixed objects. The morning conditions appeared perfect. Light westerly winds at 3 to 6 miles per hour, good visibility, and water temperatures in the comfortable mid-60s typical for August. During ground preparation, Reed's coach had noticed her tendency to step off asymmetrically during practice exits on a trolley bar. This seemingly minor flaw would prove catastrophic in the unforgiving environment of base jumping, where body position at exit determines everything that follows. The instructor emphasized the importance of a square, stable exit and immediate heading control, but muscle memory developed over just a few training sessions couldn't override instinctive reactions under stress. Reed's single parachute base rig featured a large, docile canopy specifically chosen for its forgiving flight characteristics and on-heading performance. The 29-year-old ground crew assistant positioned himself downstream with water rescue equipment, a standard precaution for bridge jumps over rivers. That morning, Reed stepped from the rail with a slight torso twist that immediately translated into rotational energy. Her legs weren't fully extended on the count, creating an asymmetrical body position that induced a mild barrel roll tendency. She corrected instinctively, but her body remained canted to the right as she pitched her pilot chute at 2 seconds. The parachute inflated briskly, but opened 90 to 120 degrees off-heading, a direct result of her unstable exit. 2 line twists locked the canopy in a right turn, pointing her toward the bridge structure instead of the designated landing area. On a 486-foot object, altitude disappears in seconds, leaving no margin for error. Reed raised her hands to neutral and kicked to clear the twists, following her training perfectly. The twists partially cleared, causing her canopy to surge left, then stabilize, but her descent path now aimed toward water short of the main landing zone. With insufficient time for a proper accuracy approach, Reed faced the nightmare scenario every base jumper fears: an uncontrolled water entry with gear. Reed impacted the Snake River belly first at a high double-digit descent rate. The surface hit drove severe blunt force trauma through her torso, resulting in widespread internal bruising, pulmonary contusions, and an immediate loss of breath consistent with high-energy water impact. Her head struck the water hard enough to induce a concussion, leaving her disoriented and struggling to orient herself as the fast-moving current began pulling her downstream. The harness and leg straps that had kept her connected to her life-saving parachute now became anchors, restricting her movement as she drifted face down in the current. Her buoyancy, reduced by waterlogged gear and internal injuries, couldn't keep her airway clear. Within minutes, the woman who had conquered complex algorithms and built innovative software solutions was drowning in a fast-moving, waist-deep water with a strong downstream current. The boat team launched immediately, reaching Reed in under 4 minutes, but the damage was done. CPR initiated on the dock couldn't reverse the combination of the blunt chest trauma, concussion, and drowning. She was pronounced dead at the hospital, another victim of the razor-thin margins that define base jumping. The investigation revealed what experienced jumpers already knew. Unstable exits on low objects create cascading failures with no recovery time. Reed's death reinforced the critical importance of exit training, but it would pale in comparison to the shocking mid-air collision that would claim another life in the Swiss Alps. It was June 22, 2015, when 31-year-old Thatcher Stone prepared for what would become one of base jumping's most shocking mid-air collisions in the legendary Lauterbrunnen Valley of Switzerland. The professional adventure photographer from Colorado had built his reputation capturing extreme sports from impossible angles, but his methodical approach to risk management couldn't prevent the split-second tragedy that was about to unfold. Stone stood 5 feet 10 inches tall, with the wiry build of someone who spent his life hanging from cliffs and leaping from mountains. His colleagues knew him as obsessively procedural, the kind of photographer who would abort a shoot if conditions weren't perfect. With over 600 base jumps under his harness, Stone had earned respect throughout the international community for his technical precision and safety-first mentality. That morning, Stone was working with 33-year-old Erik Larsen, a competent tracker with 300 jumps who had flown with Stone multiple times before. The pair planned to execute parallel tracking lines for a magazine feature, launching from the classic valley exit point approximately 2,000 feet above the meadows below. The conditions appeared ideal. Light-up valley winds registered 4 to 8 miles per hour with excellent visibility down the dramatic limestone walls. Test streamers showed minor drift toward the wall after 15 seconds of flight time, but both jumpers had factored this into their flight plans. During the briefing, Stone emphasized horizontal separation and staggered tracking lines to prevent convergence. The plan called for Stone to exit first, establishing the left line, while Erik would follow 3 seconds later on a parallel track further right. Both carried audible altimeters and standard single parachute base rigs. At the designated time, Stone executed a clean exit, achieving a stable track within 2 seconds. Erik followed precisely on schedule, but made a critical navigation error that would prove fatal. Instead of maintaining his planned offset to the right, Erik unconsciously matched Stone's track angle, setting up a convergence that neither jumper initially recognized. For the first 10 seconds, both men flew their intended lines, building a horizontal distance from the cliff face at ground speeds approaching 100 miles per hour. Stone angled 30 degrees off the fall line, while Erik, focused on his own flight path, gradually drifted onto a collision course. The relative closure rate between the two jumpers reached 20 miles per hour. At 14 seconds into the jump, Erik's lower leg brushed Stone's right shoulder in what seemed like minor contact. The impact was slight by collision standards, but at those speeds and altitudes, even gentle contact can prove catastrophic. Stone's stable track immediately destabilized, his left shoulder dropping as a mild roll developed. Recognizing the dangerous situation, Stone pitched his pilot chute at 15 seconds to arrest his instability. However, the parachute deployment occurred during his roll, creating an asymmetric body position that caused his canopy to inflate 180 degrees off-heading, now pointing directly toward the limestone wall. Line twists locked his risers, preventing immediate steering inputs. Stone found himself approximately 150 feet from the wall, with his canopy beginning a slow right turn. The altitude remaining gave him perhaps 8 to 10 seconds to resolve the situation, but the physics were working against him. At 25 miles per hour, Stone's canopy and body struck the limestone slab with devastating force. The impact occurred feet first, causing immediate bilateral leg fractures and pelvic trauma, but the secondary collision as his torso struck the rock proved fatal. His skull base was fractured on impact, causing massive intracranial bleeding, while multiple rib fractures punctured both lungs. Erik maintained control throughout the sequence and landed safely in the designated meadow. He immediately relayed GPS coordinates to the local mountain rescue service. The helicopter response team reached Stone's position within 45 minutes, but the medic found no signs of life. Death was attributed to severe blunt force trauma from the wall impact, following an off-heading opening caused by the mid-air contact. While Stone's death shocked the base jumping community with its sudden violence, nothing could prepare them for what happened next in the Italian Dolomites, where nature itself would turn deadly in ways no jumper could have anticipated. It was September 14, 2018, when 26-year-old Lana Davies arrived at Monte Brento in the Italian Dolomites, unaware that invisible atmospheric forces would claim her life within hours. The marine biologist from Seattle had spent years studying the ocean's most dangerous currents, but the deadly downdrafts lurking around sun-heated limestone peaks remained beyond her expertise. Davies stood 5 feet 4 inches tall with the compact build of someone equally comfortable diving to coral reefs or launching from mountain cliffs. Her colleagues knew her as methodical and data-driven, approaching both scientific fieldwork and extreme sports with analytical precision. She had logged 160 base jumps over 3 years, with 40 in wingsuits, making her competent but still learning mountain flying. The 45-year-old local mentor guiding Davies that day was a veteran of over 800 jumps from Monte Brento alone. He understood how the massive limestone face could create treacherous conditions even on seemingly perfect days. A 38-year-old spotter positioned himself in the valley with wind streamers and radio contact. Monte Brento's natural cliff exit offered one of Europe's most spectacular wingsuit flights, with a long glide over forested slopes to the valley floor. The morning forecast called for light northeasterly winds with variable surface conditions. However, the mentor had noticed something troubling during dawn reconnaissance: intermittent downlines near the ridge where heated limestone created unpredictable thermal activity. Davies had chosen an intermediate wingsuit designed for stable glide ratios, paired with a single parachute base rig featuring a pilot chute sized for reliable openings. Her equipment represented the gold standard for mountain wingsuit flying, but no gear could compensate for the atmospheric trap ahead. The group delayed their planned early exit due to logistics, pushing jump time toward late morning when thermal activity typically intensified. The mentor suggested waiting until afternoon, but Davies felt confident and eager to experience the famous Brento line. That late morning, Davies executed a clean wingsuit launch, immediately achieving stable inflation and establishing her glide toward the valley. Her initial track looked textbook perfect, angled 20 to 30 degrees off terrain to maintain safe separation. For 18 seconds, she maintained ground speed around 95 miles per hour with adequate glide performance. Then, the mountain struck back. At 20 seconds, Davies encountered a localized downdraft created by superheated limestone, radiating thermal energy. The invisible column of descending air caught her wingsuit like a giant hand, dramatically increasing her descent rate while dramatically increasing her vertical descent rate and collapsing her glide margin. Davies recognized the danger immediately, flattening her wingsuit angle to regain margin, but the downdraft's intensity overwhelmed her control inputs. At 24 seconds, she deployed her parachute higher than usual to avoid contouring dangerously low over rising terrain. Her pilot chute deployed cleanly, but the canopy inflated 90 to 120 degrees off heading due to turbulent air. Line twists developed momentarily before clearing, but her heading now pointed toward the slope instead of the designated landing area. The persistent downdraft continued affecting her canopy's performance, causing a brief partial collapse on the left side. Davies applied riser input to steer away from terrain, but her turn rate proved insufficient to clear the rising slope. The combination of off-heading opening, persistent sink, and reduced canopy performance had created an inescapable trajectory toward the rocky mountainside. At 28 miles per hour, Davies struck loose talus stones feet first. The impact shattered both lower legs and fractured her pelvis, but rotational energy carried her torso forward into unforgiving rocks. Multiple ribs cracked on impact, puncturing both lungs and causing severe internal bleeding. The ground spotter reached the crash site in 12 minutes, finding Davies unconscious and barely breathing. A helicopter rescue team arrived quickly, but advanced life support couldn't reverse the massive internal trauma. Davies was pronounced dead at the scene, another victim of invisible atmospheric forces that make mountain wingsuit flying one of base jumping's most demanding disciplines. But the community would soon face a different nightmare when darkness and fog combined to create the perfect storm. It was October 3, 2016, when 29-year-old Caspian Cole made the decision that would cost him his life at New River Gorge Bridge in West Virginia. The adventure guide from Fayetteville had built his reputation on pushing boundaries and taking clients to places other guides wouldn't dare venture, but his reckless confidence would finally catch up with him in the pre-dawn darkness. Cole stood 6 feet 1 inch tall with the lean, muscular frame of someone who lived for adrenaline, His clients knew him as charismatic and fearless, the kind of guide who would promise experiences that existed nowhere else. What they didn't know was that Cole had been operating increasingly dangerous illegal jumps to fund his expensive lifestyle, charging premium rates for prohibited night jumps. That night, Cole was guiding a 45-year-old executive who had paid $15,000 for an exclusive night jump from the 876-foot bridge. The client possessed only 20 legal daylight bridge jumps of experience, making him woefully unprepared for the challenges of night jumping in marginal conditions. The weather conditions should have been an immediate red flag. Light fog layers drifted along the river surface, while variable winds gusted between 5 and 10 miles per hour in the cool October air. Visibility was severely compromised, with handheld torch tests showing significant beam scatter in the fog. Even experienced night jumpers would have considered these conditions unacceptable. Cole's equipment included a standard single parachute base rig with simple marker lights attached to his harness. Unlike professional night operations, he carried no night vision equipment or sophisticated lighting systems. His only concession to the darkness was a hook knife for emergency line cutting, a tool that would ironically contribute to his death. The plan was simple but illegal. Launch in the early morning hours when traffic was minimal and law enforcement presence reduced. Cole had chosen this timing based on months of observation, believing he could complete the jump and escape before authorities could respond. In the pre-dawn darkness, Cole stepped from the bridge catwalk into the darkness below. His exit appeared stable, but visual degradation occurred immediately as fog enveloped his descent. Within seconds, Cole lost all visual reference points, unable to distinguish between sky, water, and the massive steel structure surrounding him. At 3 seconds into the jump, Cole pitched his pilot chute for a conservative opening, recognizing his compromised situation. The parachute inflated smoothly, but opened slightly off heading toward the bridge's understructure, a common occurrence that would normally be easily correctable in daylight conditions. The light tailwind below the bridge deck began drifting Cole's canopy toward the steel support members. He applied brake inputs to steer away, but the fog made it impossible to judge distances or relative motion accurately. His depth perception was completely compromised in the darkness. Cole's right suspension lines made contact with a lateral beam, causing his canopy to partially deform and develop a turn back toward the structure. The physics of bridge jumping had turned against him, with the very architecture designed to support traffic now becoming a deadly obstacle course. As his canopy loaded and unloaded against the steel framework, Cole found himself suspended approximately 220 feet above the river, swinging like a pendulum into the unforgiving metal structure. Each impact drove his body against steel beams with increasing force, causing blunt trauma to his head and torso. Recognizing his desperate situation, Cole deployed his hook knife to cut a snagged control line, hoping to free himself from the entanglement. However, his panicked movements in the darkness caused him to lose control of the blade, and repeated pendulum strikes against the steel structure caused severe head trauma and suspected rib fractures. Within minutes, Cole's breathing became labored and then ceased entirely. His client watched helplessly from above as the man who had promised him the ultimate thrill died suspended in his own parachute lines, a victim of the darkness and fog he had so recklessly challenged. The technical rope rescue team required 90 minutes to reach Cole's position, finding him unresponsive with no pulse, his body bearing evidence of repeated impacts against the bridge structure. What started as an illegal thrill ride had ended in tragedy, with Cole paying the ultimate price for his arrogance. His death marked the end of a deadly 4-year period that had exposed the razor-thin margins between survival and catastrophe in the world of base jumping. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.